Well, we're back to the Alive series. So Steve did the first one a couple of weeks ago, and this is the second one. And as a way of starting, as a way of giving a bit of insight to me and a bit of personal connection for you, I was going to tell you a little bit about a holiday. And it was a holiday that I had 2 years ago when I was having my sabbatical. And because we had a bit more time that summer, we decided we should have a special holiday. And we decided we were going to go to Scotland and do lots of different things in Scotland. And one of the things that we did was we did the North Coast 500, which is the route right around the very top of Scotland. And we spent about a week driving around, stopping at different places and seeing that. And it was amazing. It really was quite an experience. We did have a great time. And we saw many, many beautiful and wonderful things. And we even had an ice cream at Dunnet Point, which is the northernmost point of the British mainland. It was raining, but we still had the ice cream. And there was all sorts of planning that went into arranging this holiday, because you can't just sort of strike out and hope for the best. You have to think about things like where you're going to fill your car up with petrol, where you're going to stay, where you're going to get food, where you're going to eat. And the day before we got to Dunnet Point and had our ice cream in the rain, we stopped somewhere, and it was somewhere that was full of promise. Walligo Haven. Anybody ever been there? To Walligo? None of you at all have ever been there. Well, this could prove useful to you. There might be a bit of useful information here if you do ever go there. It's described as one of the most remarkable and inaccessible harbours in Scotland. It's surrounded on three sides by 250-foot cliffs. And I've got a picture. Is it all right to stick that up? So that's my daughter walking down the steps. So depending on who you believe, there are 365 steps. There's another source that says 330. We counted, and we didn't get 330 or 365. I can't remember quite what the figure was, but it wasn't either of those. And those steps allow you to go right down to see it properly, and then to climb back up again. And it sounded like somewhere that was worth having a look. But it was really when I saw the word cafe in a guidebook that I thought, this is somewhere we should visit. We parked, we found the steps, we walked all the way down to the bottom, and it was pretty. There was a cliff that looks a bit like an elephant if you sort of squint and look at it. And there was sea, and there was rocks to explore. But there was no cafe. There was no cafe. Now, you might not be surprised to hear that I was a bit disappointed about that. I was looking forward to having a cup of coffee and maybe, just maybe, a piece of cake. Even worse, I told all my family, we should go to this place because it's beautiful, it's amazing, and there's a cafe. And of course, there wasn't. But that was part of the expectation of it. It was a reward for climbing down 365 steps and having to climb up them all again. Now, in the overall scheme of things, it wasn't a big deal. But honestly, I was a bit disappointed. I was a bit disappointed that that cafe wasn't there, that it didn't live up to all of my hopes and my expectations. And you've probably had similar experiences of disappointment with things that are trivial things, but somehow you still feel it. And if we can be disappointed by things at that sort of level, then how much more so with things that are much worse, that are much more difficult to cope with. The big things in life. We can find that our hopes and our dreams are really crushed. We could be met with absolutely devastating news. And we all know, don't we, that life can be incredibly tough. As I was preparing for this morning, a song came on the radio from the band Elbow. And as I heard it, it just reminded me of another song by the same band from a few years ago, and I was looking it up. It was written in response to personal loss and despair at some of the things that were going on in our country. And the song starts with this line: and I don't know Jesus anymore. And it goes on to ask a question. How do you keep your eyes ablaze in these faith-free, hope-free, charity-free days? And in an interview at the time, Guy Garvey, who wrote those lyrics, said this. I've got it for the screen. He said, well, I realized recently when somebody very, very close to me was very, very ill what I believe, because I was brought up a Christian. But I haven't considered myself a Christian for well over half my life now. But I realized in the desperation of prayer, and it was the absolute desperation, I don't want to go into the details because it was just horrific. I found myself saying, God, all the gods, anything anybody's ever believed in, every proton of goodwill that's forced the universe to change for the better, spare me a few scraps here for this person I love. And he went on to say as part of that interview that he doesn't believe in any divine being or embodiment of God. But I think as he found, and for any of us, if we were to try that, when we just cry out to an impersonal force, to a dispassionate universe and just ask for help, what we discover is that it's cold and it's unfeeling and it's uncaring. Our theme today is being surprised by hope. And it's something that stands in contrast to what I've just been talking about, what I've just described. The belief that there is a God embodied in Jesus who loves us, who cares about us, who warmly invites us to know him, and the hope that he brings so that we can be fully alive. And having our hope restored is essential to this. But it's worth saying there are different types of hope, and we've got another slide to put on the screen. So there's vague hope, like if you sit here today and hope that it will be a white Christmas. It's possible, it's not impossible, but it's quite unlikely. But still, it could happen. So it is a vague sort of hope. An optimistic hope, like you might believe that England have a good chance in the Euros this year, based on all sorts of factors. But if you were to place a large bet on England winning the competition, you might find, like with almost every other time we've been in a major tournament, that it was a false hope. And that clouded your judgment. And if you placed that large bet, you would probably be out of pocket. You certainly would have been in the past, apart from that one time. There are plenty of people, aren't there, who have lost thousands and thousands of pounds gambling because they had optimistic hope, but it's proven costly. Then there's resilient hope. Resilient hope sees a better future. It determines to take responsibility, some personal responsibility for achieving the goal. It's more realistic. It keeps on working at it, even when things don't go according to plan. And this is the sort of hope we've seen if you've been following all the post office scandal stuff, the sort of hope that someone like Alan Bates has shown to really press through and to seek justice no matter what's come against them, for that mistreatment, for the wrongful convictions, for the financial losses. But however tenacious, however determined you are, there are some things that no amount of self-will can ever overcome because they're out of our control. There's that famous quote from Benjamin Franklin who said, "But in this world nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." Now you can try and manage them, but they'll get you in the end. But for Christians, hope is something different to these things. It's living hope. And living hope is based on the resurrection, and that's Jesus rising from the dead. And this is what it says. We can put it on the screen, Jeremy. And some of the words in the New Testament of the Bible that were written after Jesus' resurrection. So this is from 1 Peter chapter 1. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So this hope, this living hope, is rooted in Jesus, that he is who he says he is, and he does what he says he will do. And if you need some pointers towards the evidence for him rising from the dead, I'm not going to do that now, but I'll happily talk to you at the end, and I can give you some things to take a look at. But one of the major pieces of evidence that we have to consider is the change that happened in the lives of those who encountered the risen Jesus. The encounter that we're looking at today is a journey of hope. It's a journey of hope that was lost, but was then restored with the discovery of living hope. And this is what happened on that first Easter Sunday in the afternoon. It's Luke chapter 24. It's not going to be on the screen, I'm just going to read it to you, but if you've got a Bible, you can look it up. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. 2 guys walking along the road. They'd been following Jesus. They'd thrown in their lot with him. With great expectation, with a sense of revolution in the air, their hopes had been dashed when Jesus was killed on the cross. Jesus was not on the throne of Israel. He hadn't led them to kick the butts of the Roman occupying forces. He hadn't led the nation to glory. He was dead, at least as far as they were concerned, despite some rumors that maybe he was alive again, but that just sounded mad. And feeling that all was lost, they walked away. They walked away to leave it all behind, full of disappointment and questions and grief. And a man joins them. And even though we are in on what was happening, that we know it was Jesus they don't recognize him. And this can be what it's like for us. You know, Jesus was alive and was physically present with them, and they missed it. He is still alive today, and he's in heaven, and he can be right there with us in the things that we're going through, spiritually. But sometimes, just like they missed him, we can miss him too. For them, despair turned to living hope when they recognized the risen Jesus. And the same is true for us when we recognize the risen Jesus spiritually present with us. We've got 3 keys to experience living hope. Jeremy, could I have the next one? First one is to open our hearts, that Jesus meets us in our disappointment. In Proverbs 13, it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And disappointment can be like not being able to find a cafe when you think there might be one there. It might be missing out on tickets to a concert that you really want to see. It might be rain when you're going to have your barbecue. But often it is something much, much deeper. It's the death of someone you love. It's been let down badly by someone you trust. It's the feeling that you get for yourself when you've let others down. In verse 21, we read their account of how before Jesus was crucified and killed, can we put that up? We had hoped, that's their hopes, we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Now their hope was misplaced because they had fixed ideas about how that was going to happen. But God had a better plan. Even when things don't work out in the way that we would hope for in this life, we do have the promise of an eternal hope. And in Jesus, we have someone who comes to us and wants to meet with us in our disappointment, if we'll let him. So it is vital that we open our hearts and we allow him in for that to happen. The second thing is to open our Bibles, because God speaks to us through the scriptures. In the story, Jesus doesn't do a big sort of reveal. There's no moment where he takes off the hat and the glasses and the false nose and says, "Hi, it's me." Instead, he points them to the scriptures and what those scriptures said about him. And these were the scriptures that were written about Jesus hundreds of years before he was born, but were fulfilled in him. All of the Bible, from beginning to end, points to Jesus and reveals him to us. And Jesus reinforces and validates that here. Through reading the Bible, Jesus reveals himself to us. And we can meet with him in a deeper way. And that's true if you've been a believer of Jesus for 5 minutes or 5 decades. A good place to start is with Mark's Gospel, which is one of the accounts of the life of Jesus in the Bible. And there's a few copies over there, so if you don't have a Bible, if you'd like to read that, you can do that. You can download an app online of the Bible and read it that way too. Delve deeper and expect that you will meet with Jesus as you read the scriptures. The third thing is to open our lives, that Jesus comes where he is welcomed. See, even with the presence of Jesus and the scriptures, the disciples still could have missed him. But they invited him to stay with them. And it was through a meal and Jesus breaking bread as part of that meal that their eyes were finally opened. Now, Jesus doesn't want to force his way into our lives, but he wants to be welcomed in by us. He's after relationships with real people, with all their disappointments and complexities. He's not after robots that are controllable and programmable. See, robots don't need living hope, but we do. And it can be ours if we welcome him. As I finish what I have to say this morning, there's an opportunity to respond. And so I'd just like to invite us all to prayer. So you might want to close your eyes, bow your heads, and let me pray. Whether you're a seeker or a believer, I want to encourage you to welcome Jesus into your life in a fresh way today. So, Father, we thank you for Jesus, who is the living hope. Today we choose to welcome you, Jesus, to come by your Holy Spirit in a fresh way. We ask that you would come and reveal yourself to us in new ways, that you'd help us to understand and to see, that you'd forgive us for our selfishness and for all the times we haven't paid attention to you. We ask that you would set us free from hopelessness and despair, that you'd help us to follow you into a life full of living hope. We ask that you would work in us to bring your life so that we can be fully alive with you. And for all who are experiencing disappointment and the struggle of that, then I just encourage you in the quiet just to think of those things and to pray to God and say, God, I want to give these things to you. So you might want to spend a few moments doing that.